Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Module 6 of the CompTIA A course. Today's module is titled Installing, Configuring and Maintaining Operating Systems. As for the main topics covered in this specific module, you'll probably notice first off that this is a very short list. Although, as the saying goes, don't judge a book by its cover, right? I mean, look at the length of this video. It's about an hour and a half long, so you can only imagine the effort I had to put in to actually get this video to be released. So the least you can do is give the video a like. I mean, after all, it's an hour and a half long. And, well, there is the fact that it also helps my channel when you guys do that. If you're new to my channel, by the way, maybe consider subscribing, preferably with the notification bell. Otherwise, you're not going to know when I release the next module, being Module 7. And if you need additional support on any topics in this specific module or just the course in general, you're welcome to drop a comment down below, and I'll gladly get back to you as soon as I can. Or alternatively, just join me on Discord. You'll also find the link in the description down below. It is not my server, but I am listed as Burning Ice Tech in that server, so you're welcome to just DM me on Discord, or you can just drop a comment there in the community, and either myself or someone will get back to you. Alright guys, let's take a look at the first topic in this module, being operating system installation types. Now, as you can see, this is obviously going to be a bit of an overview of the whole installation process, if you will. So the first thing you need to go and do is select an installation method. Now what is meant by this is, are you going to go and do a clean install? In other words, is it going to be a fresh copy, brand spanking new Windows, where it's basically blank for the most part? Or are you going to be doing an in-place upgrade? Now what they mean by the word in-place upgrade is you have an existing operating system of some kind on your machine and you would like to go and upgrade that to a newer, better version of Windows. So this could be an example of you're maybe running Windows 8.1 and you would like to upgrade that sucker to Windows 10. Or maybe you're running Windows 10 and you would like to go and upgrade to that new fancy Windows 11. So for an in-place upgrade to work, you need to have an existing operating system on your hard drive, and there's obviously requirements that you need to meet first before you can go and upgrade. It's not a matter of, okay, I've got an operating system, let's upgrade. Nope. Certain requirements need to be met first, like you need to have the same architecture and all kinds of stuff like that. More on that later. Now, clean install, like we just said, that is a fresh copy, which means your hard drive is blank, or if it's not, you're probably going to go and wipe it and just go and install a clean copy. The next thing you're going to have to go and do is check compatibility. You'll see here it mentions hardware, peripherals, and applications. Now, hardware is not normally that big of a concern anymore these days. I mean, if you can run Windows 7, 8, or 10, you're good to go because they pretty much have the same hardware requirements. The only real issue here is if you guys are going to go run Windows 11, which is not covered by this course. I'm going to emphasize on that. You're not going to get asked about Windows 11 in the exam. It's not covered in this course. So when I mention Windows 11 in this course, it's purely as a courtesy to you guys, just as fun facts. So regards to Windows 11, certain hard requirements might not work. If you've got Windows 10 on your PC, that does not necessarily mean you can run Windows 11. RAM wise, CPU wise, hard drive wise, you should be good to go. But Windows 11, kind of sort of has other requirements. Like you need to now have a TPM chip. It's an actual physical chip on the motherboard. The chip itself is not something new, but not everybody has that chip. So that chip is a chip that does encryption on your PC. It needs to be 2.0, this chip. More on that later, but it's not something covered in this particular course. So peripherals wise, make sure your peripherals is compatible with the new operating system. Application wise, I don't know, man. I suppose you can go and check that, but that's more applicable for if you're going to go do an upgrade. If you've got something like Windows 8 that currently has some application installed in it, then you might want to go and run those applications on the new Windows. And to do that, you need to first go and double check that they're actually, in fact, compatible. You don't want to go and upgrade and then afterwards find out that your applications don't work. That's going to be a real slip, a real drag. Now, if you're upgrading, back up existing data and settings. You'll find that it's very unlikely that something's going to go wrong. I've been doing this for more years than I can count, and I've never had a situation where I've upgraded a machine and data got lost. But just because it has never happened doesn't mean it can not happen. So I'm actually surprised that they mention you should go and back up, because in most cases when it comes to upgrading, they never mention you should go and back up. It is a good idea. So even if it's something small like upgrading a PC, you want to go and back up. If need be, make another backup just for good measure. You never know. So back up, and then once you've upgraded and you see everything successful, everything is working the way it's intended, then you can go and obviously get rid of that backup and free up some space. The next step here is choose a boot method for loading the operating system setup files. So what is meant by this is, how are you going to go and boot that computer? We're not talking about booting from the usual hard drive like you would normally do. That involves you already having Windows installed on your hard drive. So if you need to install Windows onto the hard drive, you're going to temporarily have to boot from someplace else. In the old days, this would normally be a CD or a DVD, and you're gonna boot from that and then eventually install the operating system files from that disk onto the hard drive, and eventually you're gonna boot from hard drive. Nowadays, DVDs and CDs are pretty much extinct, so you're probably gonna find yourself booting from something like a USB stick, potentially over the network. These are the methods that you're gonna be booting from. Our next step is prepare the fixed disk, in other words your hard drive, static hard drive, and copy the setup files to the target. Now it sounds very complicated and very fancy, but the fact of the matter is this is going to happen automatically. So as soon as you boot from that USB or that DVD or the network and you start the installation process, the only thing you need to actually go and do, even if you are a technician, is you're going to go click on install, or you're going to go click on upgrade, and believe it or not, that is actually it. You're going to go click on install, maybe choose the hard drive at most, the language, and that is it. It's going to go and copy all the files automatically. How cool is that? Once you've done all of that, once it's copied all the files and installed the files, it's going to go and ask you for a few installation configurations, which is the point here. It says configure installation options. That normally involves things like what language do you want this PC to be in, what kind of keyboard layout do you want, what time zone are you in, there might be like a license agreement you've got to agree to, that general stuff. What exactly you see ultimately depends on the operating system you're installing. If you go look at some of the newer versions of Windows 11, once again not included in this course, the amount of stuff you need to go and complete after installation is just insane. It just feels like you're never going to finish those damn menus. So by the end of the day, once you eventually finish all those menus, you're going to land on your desktop, you're going to be glad you're done and over with that. And then of course, our very last step here is verify the installation was successful. Now you might probably say, okay, well, if I landed on the desktop, isn't it successful? Yeah, usually, but not necessarily. There is a few things that might not have worked. This could be something like a program. Maybe you did an upgrade and a certain program does not work anymore. The most common example I've seen of this is normally the antivirus. So if you did an upgrade from Windows 8 to Windows 10, you would find the antivirus generally doesn't work anymore. So you're going to have to go and uninstall the antivirus and reinstall the antivirus based on my experience. You're not going to have to go and download another copy or a different version. What I usually did is I just installed the exact same antivirus using the exact same setup file, and then magically it would just work. It's the darnest thing, but for some reason it works. So if you ever encounter something like that, you can literally just go and uninstall it, reinstall it, and presto, it's going to work. Alright, so let's take a look at operating system installation types. So don't confuse this with installation methods. The methods they spoke of earlier was to go and upgrade or to go and do a clean installation. So here we're talking about installation types, which is attended installation or unattended installation. Attended is kind of what we've been doing all along. That's what everybody does. They just don't know it's called attended. Attended means you're doing everything yourself manually, or at least for the most part. You're going to go put that DVD in, you're going to go put that USB stick in or connect it to the network, you're going to go click on install, you're going to go click next, 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 you're going to go click on all the options that you need to go through. Everything's going to be done manually by yourself. Whereas unattended installation normally means it's either completely automated or at the very least somewhat automated. Based on my experience, you would find it's normally just somewhat automated. It's very rare you'll find a company where everything is 100% automated. Now, within that category, you actually get different subcategories, which I'm not going to really mention, but just in case you're curious, it would normally be referred to as high touch installation, low touch, or sometimes referred to as light touch installation, And then lastly, zero touch installation. High touch once again means you do everything yourself. It requires a high level of interaction from you as the user. Low touch means there's some level of automation involved. Low touch or light touch. So it's automated but not quite there yet. It still needs some interaction from the user, being you. Zero touch installation would be a 100% automated environment where everything happens automatically, and you could quite frankly actually be at home asleep, or you could be watching a movie at home, none the wiser this thing is actually taking care of itself. That is a zero touch installation. So unattended could be low touch slash light touch, or it could be zero touch, where attended is for the most part a high touch installation where you do every damn thing yourself. Alright, and then we have more on operating system installation types. Now, funny enough, I referred to this as methods earlier, and now they're calling it types. Don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger here. At the end of the day, this is how the course is presented. So once again, we know already actually what clean install is, and we technically already know what an in-place upgrade is. But just to repeat, a clean install normally involves you doing everything from scratch. So this is probably going to be a brand spanking new machine which has no operating system, or it could very well be a machine that you want to go and wipe and load, is the terminology we use, which means you're going to go and wipe whatever is on the hard drive and do a fresh clean copy of the Windows installation. Upgrade normally involves you having an existing operating system on the machine that you would like to probably go and upgrade to a newer, better version. Alright, so here's a few bullet points just to recap. Clean install installs the operating system to a new computer. That could be not set in stone, it could potentially be an existing computer, or like we said, replace an existing operating system on the computer. In other words, we call that a wipe and load. It's also generally more reliable than upgrading. So if you need to give someone a new operating system, and assuming you're going to stay over in the same architecture and all that, you could potentially go and upgrade, because that's obviously going to involve you not having to go and reinstall all the applications and all that kinds of stuff. But it's not very reliable. I mean, there's very, very good likelihood that something is going to go wrong. I can almost guarantee you something is not going to work. So generally, if you were to go and take the time and the effort to actually just go and back up that machine, it's going to be more work, I'm not going to lie. But if you were to go and back up that machine and just go and completely reload the whole darn thing from scratch, it is going to be more reliable. You're going to have way less issues with programs that's not compatible and this that's not working and that's not working. So yeah, any mid to large size organizations usually perform this using images. So earlier I told you if you want to go and put an operating system onto a machine, you would generally use a DVD or a CD, potentially a USB stick, sometimes referred to as a flash drive or a memory stick, or in some cases people would go and use the network. Now with regards to the network, it could potentially be done via images, not set in stone though. So an image is when someone has pre-configured a PC of everything that it needs, the Windows operating system, the drivers, all the programs, everything that needs to be on that machine is already on that machine, and they will go and capture that as an image and store it somewhere, like on a server. And whenever there's a new employee or when someone broke the old PC and they need a new PC, you would go and take that image that you've captured previously and deploy it to that new machine. And once you've deployed it to that machine, that obviously goes a lot quicker than installing Windows from scratch. And once it's done, the whole Windows is going to be installed, but not just that. The whole driver is going to be installed, all the programs that's needed, all the settings that's needed, everything would be pre-configured. Doesn't that sound nice? Now, some bullet points regarding the in-place upgrade. It obviously installs it on top of the existing operating system. No ifs or buts about that. It has to be done that way. Unfortunately, like we said earlier, there are a few requirements. It has to stay within the same architecture. So what I mean by that is, if you're currently running or if your client is currently running Windows 32-bit, you can only upgrade to another operating system that's 32-bit. You cannot upgrade from a 32-bit Windows to a 64-bit Windows, and vice versa. If you're running a 64-bit Windows of something, you cannot upgrade to a 32-bit Windows of something. So you can switch architectures, yes you can, but that normally requires a clean install. So if you're hypothetically running Windows 8 32-bit and you would like to run Windows 10 but 64-bit of Windows 10, what are you going to have to go and do? You're going to have to unfortunately wipe and load. In other words, a clean install. But if you're running Windows 8 64-bit and you would like to switch to Windows 10 64-bit, which is the same architecture, then you've got a choice. You can either go and upgrade or do a clean install. It really is your choice at the end of the day there. So another benefit of doing an in-place upgrade is it retains applications, user settings, data files, all that. Now I do want to point out that it does not do that by default. So if you're about to go and do an upgrade, it normally asks you, what would you like to keep? Would you like to keep the applications? If so, maybe the settings. And would you like to maybe keep the data while we at it? So it doesn't just do that by default. It's actually going to ask you. You can think of it as like a list. It's going to ask you, what do you want to keep, kind sir? And then obviously it goes about saying you need to go and back up. You can't do anything before you go and back up. And this is usually all performed on home systems. It's very unlikely you're going to find someone at the office in a medium to large size organization doing an upgrade. They just don't do that. They will go and pre-prepare a machine, capture it as an image, and just go and deploy it to everybody in the company. They don't do upgrades this way within a company. This is generally only done this way at a home or a very, very small office environment where they've got like 10 or 20 people, that kind of situation. All right, gentlemen and ladies, if there's any ladies actually watching this. So with regards to actually installing that Windows onto your PC, whether we're doing this via an upgrade or a clean install, I think for this example, let's just say it's a clean installation. Brand spanking new Windows that you're installing on a brand spanking new PC. Now, how do you get Windows onto that machine? As we've said earlier, this can be done via DVD or a CD. Could be a memory stick, flash drive, whatever you want to go and call it, or you can do it via an image, which is generally done via the network. So you can see here, set up and prioritize boot methods in the firmware setup. So you're going to have to go and choose where do you want to boot from. So if you know for a fact you've got a DVD of the new operating system, and that's the way you want to go about installing this, you're going to have to go into the BIOS of that computer or UEFI, depending on how new your motherboard is. So for the older motherboards, it'll probably be BIOS. For the newer ones, it's going to be the UEFI, and you're going to have to go and reconfigure the booting order. Where will your computer or your client's computer go and look for an operating system first? By default, the average computer will go look on a hard drive first. It's going to go look for a Windows operating system there. If it finds one, great, there we go. It's going to boot. But if it does not find something on the first bootable device, being the hard drive, it's going to look on the next device in the boot order, which might be, let's say, your DVD-ROM. If it finds something there, then it's going to boot. If it does not, it's going to carry on the procedure and just look on the next device and the next device. Now, if you're about to go and install Windows, you do not want to boot from the hard drive, whether it's got an operating system on it or not, because you cannot go and delete the operating system on the hard drive if it has one, if it's currently being used. You cannot delete something if it's in use. So to avoid that from happening, if you have a potential operating system on a hard drive, you want to boot from someplace else, like a DVD, flash drive, or what have you. So you just go and choose a method. You can see here optical disk, or ISO image. ISO image is basically just a digital version of a physical disk nowadays. That's still actually very widely used, especially at virtual machines. You can go and use an external drive, a flash drive, or you can just go and boot via the network and install the operating system via the network. Now here we also mention reprioritize boot order after the installation. So you're not just going to go and fiddle with the boot order before the installation. Once you're done, you need to go and reconfigure that as well. I wouldn't say this is compulsory. It is actually still going to work. The PC is going to work just fine. It's just if you're not going to go and reprioritize the boot order after the installation, it's going to look sloppy, especially if this is for a client's PC. So where that PC could actually start within 10 seconds, you're going to find it's going to take 20 seconds, 30 seconds, to start. Because what's going to happen is if you installed Windows from the DVD, let's say it was a DVD, it's going to first go and look for an operating system on the DVD every time that person starts that PC. It's not going to find one, and eventually it's going to find one on a hard drive. So where it could have just taken 10 seconds, now it's going to take 30 seconds, 60 seconds, which is just unprofessional. It's just downright not nice. So once you're done installing Windows on your machine or your client's machine, you go back into that BIOS or the UEFI and you go and rearrange that so that the hard drive is the very first booting device. So what's going to happen is when you or that client start that PC after the installation, that PC is going to look on the hard drive first for an operating system if they start that PC, and it's obviously going to find it because, well, you've installed it there now, didn't you? Alright everyone, since we're talking about installation and installing Windows and all that, probably worth mentioning that you get something called secure boot. Not necessarily something you need to worry about, but it does prevent you from installing software that is not trusted. In other words, operating systems that is not trusted. So if you're going to try and install something other than Windows on your machine, there is a chance that this secure boot, in quotes, might, give you a little bit of a headache. So if you're trying to install something other than Windows, it's advisable to go into your PC's UEFI, used to be the old BIOS, and just go and turn that sucker off. You can see here I've got a list of things for you guys. It's available in UEFI firmware, in other words, the replacement for your BIOS, the software that's built into your motherboard. It restricts operating system installation to trusted software, in other words, well-known operating systems like Windows. Anything out of the ordinary is going to look fishy to this, and it's going to stop you from installing it. So you might need to disable it to be able to install certain operating systems. I'm not going to mention names here. I don't want to demote any operating systems. But if you're going to try and install something other than Windows, there's a pretty good chance it's going to give you a little bit of a headache. And you might need to go into the UEFI and simply just flip a switch, digitally speaking. Alright guys, so then we also have disk formatting and partitioning. You're almost guaranteed to do formatting at some point. Partitioning, maybe not so much, but it is very good to know what partitioning is. At some point in your life, you might end up doing it. So what is partitioning? That is basically just taking a hard drive, digital, physical, laptop, or, desktop wise, and subdividing it, digitally speaking. So you can think of partitioning as taking a piece of pie or a pizza and cutting it into slices. You're cutting that pie or that pizza into slices. One of those slices of that pie or that pizza is your system partition, which is listed here. The system partition is basically going to get installed onto that section of the hard drive. So most hard drives only have one partition, which means you're using the whole hard drive to yourself. It's kind of like eating the whole pizza without, slicing it into any pieces in the first place. So that's what most hard drives look like. It's a pizza that has not been sliced, or it's a pie that has not been sliced. Now, if you're going to go and partition your hard drive, you can imagine it as slicing that pizza of yours or that pie of yours. The amount of partitions, well, that's the amount of slices you've got. So on average, you won't see someone partitioning a hard drive more than 2, 3, maybe 4 times. I would say going more than 2 times, even that is already weird enough as it is. So system partition, that is simply the main slice where you're going to be installing your Windows on. Boot partition, as you can see there, the partition that contains the operating system. It's kind of the same thing as what we're saying here. So where are you going to be booting from? It is worth noting that you can actually possibly have more than one boot partition on your computer. Maybe you took a hard drive, it's maybe a 1 terabyte hard drive, you partitioned it into 2, you literally sliced it right down the middle, so it's 500 gigs, 500 gigs, and on the one partition you installed a Windows, maybe it's Windows 10, and on the second partition you also installed a different Windows. So this computer of yours effectively has more than one operating system. They're both on the same hard drive, but the one is just on one partition and the other one is on a different partition. So that's a form of multi-boot. It is not the only way to get it done, but it's at least one of the many ways you can go and get it done. Alright, so determine how the computer will be used. Will you have multi-boot? Most people and most organizations will not have multi-boot. Multi-boot simply means you've got multiple operating systems installed in your computer. They could be on the same hard drive, they could be on different partitions on the same hard drive. They could be on different hard drives in your computer or different virtual hard drives in your computer. The point with multi-boot is you have 2 or more operating systems. Now, when I say multi-boot, you're not actually limited to 2 operating systems. There are people out there that's got 3, maybe 4, or even more operating systems on the computer. On average, you'll find the average Joe, like myself, has 1 operating system. And there are cases when you might very well have 2 operating systems. So if you go back about 10 years in time to roughly about, let's say, 2009 to 2011, give or take that period, give or take a year or two, at that point in time, every Joe in IT would have about 2 operating systems. And the reason for that was half of them would have an operating system on 32-bit and half of them would have an operating system on 64-bit. So it was a bit of a pickle. So if you were in IT and you wanted to run both of them, why not? You might as well. You could actually go and install a 32-bit operating system of, let's say, Windows 7 on one partition, and then you go and install a 64-bit version of Windows 7 on another partition. You might wonder, but why would you want to go and do that if 64-bit is obviously the better one out of the two? It's much faster, it's much better. Well, At that point in time, even though 64-bit was the better one out of the two, not all programs were exactly compatible on 64-bit. So you might find back then a lot of programs were only available in 32-bit versions. So you would like to use 64-bit, which is why you installed on a second partition, but unfortunately some of the programs and games and stuff that you have only work on 32-bit, which is why you're still going to keep a second backup copy, so to speak, of another 32-bit operating system. And eventually, one day after 2-3 years, when most stuff moves to 64-bit, then you can just go and obviously get rid of all the stuff on your 32-bit operating system and just go and pull it over to the 64-bit one. As easy as that. Anyway, so does the boot partition have room for growth? That is a good idea. You don't want to go and use up all the space on that partition. So if you're going to go and allocate, let's say, only a mere 30 gigs or 50 gigs to your boot partition, that is not wise, because if you're going to install Windows 10, 64-bit takes about 20 gigs, and 32-bit of Windows 10 takes about 16 gigs. That is without any updates, any patches, no programs have been installed, no drivers have been installed. So at the end of the day, after installing your Windows drivers and programs, there might very well be no room left. So in the foreseeable future, if you ever need to go and install something or maybe put in any data on that machine, where are you going to put it? There's going to be no room left. So you need to plan for future growth. So if you only need 50 gigs now, you might want to go and give yourself maybe another 50 or 100 gigs of free space, depending on what you intend on actually using that machine for. If you know for a fact you're not going to need much space in the future, then I suppose, sure, go for it. But if you're going to be using it for personal work, and you know in the foreseeable future you're going to need it for documents, storage and all that, yeah, you need to plan for that. Thirdly, will RAID be implemented? Now, RAID is not one specific thing, as you guys might remember from the module where we discussed storage and memory. So if you haven't watched that module yet, that is a module to go and watch if you want to know what RAID is. So in a nutshell, RAID is a form of redundancy and performance, depending on which one you're using. The ones we discussed in that module was RAID 0, RAID 1, and RAID 5. It is worth mentioning though that you do get other forms of RAID as well, but those are the only ones that's covered in this course and the only ones you need to know for the exams. So depending on what RAID you have, you could either give yourself more performance or redundancy or both. So will this PC have RAID? Because if it's going to have RAID, you might need to factor that into your hard drives. Lastly, is a solid state or a hybrid hard drive going to be used? So SSD simply stands for solid state. That's the newer version of hard drives you get. It has no moving parts. Now, if you find yourself having to go and buy one from your local computer store or wherever you want to go and buy your hardware, if it's for a laptop, you're going to find it's going to look exactly like a laptop hard drive. It just happens to have no moving parts inside. If it's for a desktop, you're going to find they're still going to give you the exact same hard drive. And the average Joe, when they get home, they normally ask me, hey, dude, do you think they gave me the wrong hard drive? No. It's because they are all the same size. Whether you're buying it for a laptop or a desktop, in physical dimensions, it's going to be the same size. Which poses a bit of a pickle, because now if it's a laptop hard drive, well, the size of a laptop hard drive at least, you're going to try and put into your desktop PC, where are you going to put it is the question. Because your desktop PC, the mountings was originally designed for those old mechanical hard drives. And that's a real situation that most of us are facing. So most of us that don't have proper casing with proper brackets will end up just putting like one screw into a hard drive so it doesn't completely just dangle around in this case and fall on the motherboard, potentially damaging a component. Anyway, so yeah, that's a solid state hard drive. We've actually somewhat covered that already in the memory module or storage module. Hybrid hard drive was also something we've covered, which means it is partially old mechanical and partially solid state. So for argument's sake, if this is a 500 gigabits hard drive, you might find that 400 gigs of that is old mechanical and about 100 to 50 gigs of that is solid state. So the solid state part is the faster part of the hard drive, and you can think of that faster part as cache. So anything that gets used quite regularly, like the operating system files, any documents and files on that machine that gets used a lot, its data gets accessed quite a lot. That gets put on the faster part of the hard drive, being the cache side. In other words, the solid state side. Any data that doesn't get accessed that regularly, maybe it's just like a document, an old movie or something, anything that's just basically being stored, for the lack of a better term, that gets put on the mechanical side, the slower side of things. Alright guys, and then we're moving on to local settings and software selection. So when you start installing your Windows operating system, whichever one it might end up being, Windows 7, 8, 10, or even Windows 11. I know Windows 11 is not mentioned this in this course. I know it's not covered in the course, but I would like to mention it to you guys a few times just so that you can get comfortable with the idea, because ultimately that is something you guys are going to be working with, even though it's not in the exam. So I'm covering it for you guys as a courtesy. Now, the menus for all of these operating systems when you install them are very much the same. They've got the same things in common. If you go look at the newer versions of Windows 10 and more specifically Windows 11, there's a few extra menus where they might ask you a few extra details, but for the most part, it is stuff you can figure out. You don't even need someone to explain it to you. Now, the first thing you need to go and do when you start installing your Windows is you're going to go click on a button that says install Windows, obviously. That's if you boot from a DVD or a flash drive, or whatever the case might be. Then you're going to be presented with a picture that I've got for you guys there. You're going to choose a language and you're going to choose a currency and a keyboard. Now, language is obviously important because otherwise your whole operating system is going to display in the wrong language. So in my case, you can see that it's chosen English as United States. It's not exactly the same if you go choose, let's say, English for United Kingdom. So make sure you choose the right language. Time and currency format. Which time and currency format do you want? You can see that the default is United States. Keyboard input method is US. So you might think, okay, I'm going to go and choose United Kingdom. No difference there. There is a difference. Even though they use the same keyboards in some cases, the keys will not be properly mapped. So in most cases, for most countries, you're going to end up choosing US. If your keys behave weirdly on your keyboard, it might be because you've chosen the wrong keyboard input here. All right, and then moving on to the second bullet point there being verify time and date display correctly. So what you're going to have to go and do is you're going to have to go and choose yourself a time zone. So that applies to pretty much all the operating systems you're going to go and install. They're going to ask you for a time. What date is it? What time is it? The date and time itself is not the biggest concern unless this is going to be a server. If it's for desktop PC, I don't know. It's probably going to help you to have the right date and time, but it's not compulsory. Time zone, however, that's a different story. So make sure you choose the right time zone. So if you are +1, you're going to scroll in a little drop down list until you find +1. If you are GMT +2, you go and choose GMT +2, and so on and so forth. So there's obviously going to be a lot of GMT +1, a lot of +2s, and a lot of +3s, and a lot of minuses. You get the idea here. So you scroll down until you find your region. And once you find your region, your time zone, so to speak, is what they call it, then you ideally want to go and choose your country or your town or something close as possible to that. It's not the end of the world if you go choose the wrong country, as long as you choose the right time zone. The only real difference there is if you choose something that's in the time zone as yours, same time zone as yours, but not the same country as yours, you might find at some point your time will not move if it's daylight savings. Your country might have daylight savings and you chose a country that does not have daylight savings. So when it's supposed to take place, it's not going to happen. Or maybe you chose the opposite. So maybe you chose a country that's got daylight savings and your country does not have it. And at some point in time, your time is just going to move on by an hour. And you're going to wonder what the cheese is going on. So that is, I think, the biggest factor here is some countries have got daylight savings and some do not. What you're also going to have to go and do, if you look at point 3, there is enter your product key. So if you've got a product key, this is the point in time where you're going to have to go and enter it. I wouldn't say this part is compulsory because it depends on if this PC is going to be used for personal use or if it's like a company PC. If it's a company PC, it might very well actually be activated by the company already on your behalf. There might be some sort of automated activation system in the background. It's all completely legal. But if it's going to be in your personal capacity, then there's a very good chance you're going to have to go and enter in your product key at this point in time. Point 4, accept the EULA, which stands for End User License Agreement. Now, that is an abbreviation you guys need to get familiar with because in the exams, they love asking about the EULA. The EULA is not something complicated. It simply just stands for the End User License Agreement, the one you guys see in front of you right now. It's basically that very annoying little agreement that nobody actually ever reads through. And sometimes you get forced to scroll through it before they actually allow you to accept it. And then you can proceed to the next menu. It's kind of like getting married. We don't know what we're getting into until it's too late. And then the last bullet point there is select an installation type. Do you intend on upgrading this machine or do you intend on doing a clean installation? Now, if you intend on upgrading the machine, it's not required to boot from a DVD or a flash drive. You can actually just put it in there while your Windows is running. And on the desktop, you can just go to that DVD or that flash drive or whatever the boot media is. Just double click on it. It's going to launch like a normal program and you can just go and say upgrade. You could actually go and do it that way. But if you want, you can go and do it the same way as what you would do if you're going to go and do a clean installation, boot from that media. Once you boot from the media, you're going to see the menu that you guys see on that little screenshot. Upgrade or custom. Now we've explained upgrade already. That normally means you already have an operating system and you simply intend on upgrading to a newer or better one. Maybe you've got Windows 7 and you would like to upgrade to Windows 10 for argument's sake. Now to be able to do that, you obviously know you need an operating system, but it also needs to be the same architecture. So if you've got Windows 7 32-bit, you cannot go upgrade to Windows 10 64-bit. You can only upgrade to Windows 10 32-bit. You need to stay within the same architecture. If it looks like you're going to need to switch architectures, then you're not going to be able to upgrade. You're going to have to do a wipe and load. In other words, a clean installation, which is that bottom one there that says custom. It says custom, but that's a brand spanking new clean installation. If you're going to do a custom / clean installation, you're absolutely going to need to go and back up your content if there's something you would like to keep on that hard drive, because it darn well will go and wipe it most likely. Unless you've got a separate partition, it's going to go and wipe it. Upgrade is recommended to go and back up, but the fact of the matter is it's probably not going to be needed at backup because I don't know about a single case where the data ever got lost. But it's still advisable to obviously go and back up, when you go and do an upgrade. Alright guys, let's take a bit of a peek at networking considerations when it comes to your brand spanking new machine. So in other words, how will that machine of yours connect to the network? So the first one up is workgroup. That is actually the default configuration for the average PC if you've just installed Windows. So in this case, let's imagine it's Windows 10. Doesn't really matter because it's exactly the same for them all. If you just installed Windows, that machine is on what we call a workgroup. It's a small group of computers on a network that share resources in a peer-to-peer fashion. So no PC is above the rest, they're all the same. So you can imagine this is a very small office or a small household. We've got laptops and desktops connected to each other via your router or a small little switch. And that is effectively that. If you want to access another machine, you're going to have to go and type in that machine's IP address or its name. And if there is a password, it'll probably be a matter of choosing an account on that other machine and providing the password which was specified on that remote destination machine. That is a workgroup situation. Not a lot of security involved there, but it gets the job done in a small home office environment. Then we have what we call a domain. A domain is what we use in a company environment in most cases. So for you to be able to first of all join a domain, you need to have the right version of Windows. And I don't mean you need to have Windows 7 or Windows 10. I mean you need to have Enterprise or Professional. So if we're talking Windows 10, you need to have Enterprise installed of Windows 10, for example. That gives you the ability to go and join what we call a domain. If your machine has been joined to your company's domain, you can go and log on with an account that is specified in what they refer to as an Active Directory. So normally at your company, physically on premises, there's a server where they've installed a role, and that role is called the ADDS role, Active Directory Domain Services. And in a nutshell, that just installs the Active Directory software, which contains all the user accounts and all the groups and all that fancy gizmos. So when you go to your machine at work, which is now joined to the domain, remember, you're going to go and type in an account, which is a company account. It's probably going to be your employee number or your name or last name or a combination of the two. When you type that in, your PC is no longer going to go and check locally if you are the owner of that device. It is going to go and contact over the network that server, which is a central point of authentication. It's going to contact that central point of authentication and it's going to say, hey, is this the owner to this account? And is the password in fact correct? If it is, authentication will occur and you'd obviously be granted access to that machine. Now, domains gives you many other perks. Obviously I can go and control all the accounts and all the groups and all that nonsense from one central point, but I can also go and enforce what we refer to as group policies. That is a benefit you only get with Active Directory domains. So I can go and basically control up to 3,000 aspects of my people. I can turn things on your PC, I can turn things off on your PC, I can allow things, block things, you name it, up to 3,000 settings. I mean, isn't that a mouthful? Then the third one here on our list is a Microsoft account. That's obviously a cloud account that you don't really have full control over. So this is generally used to go and access all kinds of Microsoft related material, cloud wise. So you can see here they say the type of account required to get apps from the Microsoft Store, to sync data between devices, access your OneDrive, and work parental controls for a child account. That's obviously just some of the things you can go and do. It's not just limited to that. Then you have what we call a local account, which is basically the exact opposite of the domain we spoke of earlier. An account that is only associated with the computer on which it was created. So when you just created your PC, well, in other words, just installed Windows, your machine is on a work group and you're using a local account. That's the default setup. And when you go and take that machine of yours, which is on a work group with a local account, and you join it to a domain, you are obviously on a domain now, and you're going to be using a domain account, which is not even listed here because I kind of accidentally explained it. So in a local account situation, if you need to log on to that machine, let's assume there is a password on it because they don't always have a password on them. You're going to go and choose the account. You will find normally you don't even have to type it in. You just choose an account. There's normally just one or two. Once you choose the account you want to log on with, it's going to ask you for a password, assuming there is one. And once you provide the password to that machine, it's going to check locally on that machine in the SAM, S-A-M, SAM. It's a very tiny little database on that computer which contains all the user accounts and passwords. There might very well just be one in there. And it's effectively just going to go and check, are you indeed the owner to that account? If you are, which means you provided the right password, authentication would occur and you're going to be granted access. In a domain situation, that's the exact opposite. You've obviously been joined to a domain, and instead of checking locally in the SAM, it's going to contact that central point of authentication, being the Active Directory we spoke of, which contains all the user accounts. It could be hundreds, it could be thousands, or tens of thousands of accounts for all we know. Alright, boys and girls, here we have post-installation tasks. In other words, tasks you're going to be doing after the installation of Windows has been successfully completed, and at this point in time you're probably landing on the desktop of your new, freshly installed Windows. Now the first one up here is hardware detection and driver installation is automated. So up until Windows XP, you had to go and do a lot of work manually yourself. For example, drivers. Up to XP, if you installed the Windows operating system, being XP at that point in time, you would have to go and install pretty much all the drivers for your hardware on your machine. If you have a network card, you would have to install a driver. If you've got a graphics card or a sound card, each and every driver for the most part would have to be installed manually. Back then this was mostly done via CD, but in some cases if you didn't have that, you could go and download it from the manufacturer's website. It was a real big inconvenience is what it was. Nowadays, since Windows Vista was released towards the end of 2008 or the beginning of 2009, it was somewhere in that vicinity, give or take a year. Since then, most hardware drivers have been installed automatically. I am saying most, I'm not saying all, because there are exceptions. So even if you're using the latest version of Windows 10 or Windows 11, there is going to be times when your Windows might very well not install the driver for something. So I would say it's about 95 to 90% accurate where it's going to go and install most drivers for most devices. But if you've got a device that's relatively, let's say, out of the ordinary, or it's a device that's very new on the market, there is a chance that your Windows does not have the driver for that device, simply because it's too darn weird or because it's too new on the market. So in your Windows, it's got a very large repository, I suppose you can think of it as a database of drivers. All of it's included, it's built into your Windows. And if your Windows, for argument's sake, say, was released in January 2021, and that new device you're trying to install was released in February 2021, that was released 1 month after your Windows. When you try and install Windows, there's a very good chance that your Windows is not going to know what that device is. It's not going to recognize it because that device was built or made after your operating system was released. So the good news here is your Windows, your drivers including, are always updating themselves via Windows updates. So by updating your Windows, if it did not have the driver, it might very well find the driver afterwards and automatically install that and update it accordingly for you. How cool is that? I mean, you gotta love automation. I love it. So can you imagine the time when you had to go and install these drivers yourself manually? Dear Lord. So what you're gonna have to go and do here, guys, I know I said it's installed automatically, most drivers at least. Once you've installed Windows, you're gonna need to go to your device manager and make sure no devices have got a yellow exclamation mark on them. A yellow exclamation mark means that device has got the wrong driver installed or no driver installed. 10 to 1 in this case is gonna be no driver installed. If something shows you any weird kind of symbol, it normally means there's no driver installed either as well. So just go and check your device manager. Check your logs they mentioned. I wouldn't say that's crucial. It's more crucial to go and check your device manager. I think that's the most important thing here. Now for optional components or third-party apps, you can alternatively go to the programs and features in your control panel, and there you'll be able to go and install programs manually. Now the fact of the matter is that is what's mentioned by A+, but realistically we only go in there if we want to go and remove programs and features or remove an update. I myself never go in there if I want to go and add application. The only times I've ever gone in there is to go and change an application, maybe a license or a feature, or if I want to go and remove something that I can't seem to remove via the good old-fashioned start menu. Then you also have Windows Store, not something that everybody uses. That is a store that's built into both Windows 8.1 as well as Windows 10. And obviously it's going to probably be included in the Windows 11 as well. So in the Windows Store, that store is a built-in store, which for the most part is going to cost you money, let's face it. They say there is a few free items in there, and I agree, I've seen a few. But most things in there are not. The store is guaranteed safe. Everything in there is guaranteed safe because they normally use certificates and all kinds of stuff like that, which people have to verify that these programs are actually legit and not some form of malware. So if you find something in there that you like, you're going to probably end up buying it. But if it's for an organization, just don't go and just buy applications. There is a chance your company might already have an application which essentially does the same thing. Now, when it comes to activating your Windows, Windows have got anti-piracy technology built into them, although I don't really think they've been very successful with that, if I'm being perfectly honest, because if you go look online, you can freely find a pirate version of any kind of Windows. I'm not going to say where because I'm not into piracy, but you can find them very easily. Now, if you have a personal version of Windows, in other words, in your personal capacity, you're going to probably have to go and activate that by providing the product key that you bought with your Windows. You're going to have to go and do it old school over the internet. That's one way. Now, should you not go and activate your Windows, you do kind of sort of have a trial period. In other words, a grace period is what they call it. It does vary from Windows to Windows. It depends on the version. So I think up until about Vista, you had about 30 or 60 days. And if you don't activate them, then it would actually start getting annoying. They would start, turning off certain features. At some point, your desktop background would go black. I'm not kidding. It would actually go black back on Vista. It was 2009, 2010. And at some point, after every hour or so of idling, your PC would just turn itself off. So in the middle of work, your PC would just turn itself off. How's that for forcing you to go and activate your PC? Now, since Windows 7 onwards, it hasn't been as extreme, but it's still considered the grace period, so you should go and activate it. Plus, it's just downright embarrassing when you've got a little watermark at the bottom right that says this Windows is not activated. That normally displays on all versions of Windows. It's like a little watermark at the bottom right of the screen that says Windows is not activated. It's just downright embarrassing is what it is. Now, in larger organizations in a company, you can go and use what they call a volume license to go and do bulk activation, which is somewhat what I spoke of earlier when we went through the steps of installing Windows. Specifically on the step where we talked about providing your product key. You might not need to do that if it's in a company environment because they might have a volume license, Obviously, in companies, they also have automated installations that automatically activate Windows for you. And you get people that actually take advantage of that. They will take their personal home PCs to work to have them automatically activated over the network, effectively stealing a company license is what they're doing. That is very frowned upon, and most companies do not approve of that. So if they catch you doing that, yeah, there might be consequences. I'm not going to say what because it obviously varies from country to country and from company to company. All right, let's take a bit of a look at repair installations. So in other words, your installation is faulty, it's corrupt, something is not working the way it's supposed to. Now in the old days, before we had this refresh and reset they speak of on the slideshow, we would go and use a Windows DVD or a Windows disk, or we'll go and use a backup, and if it's in a company environment, we would potentially just go and use an image, which is a clone of your PC, and we're just going to restore it by that way. Now this slideshow is about refresh and reset. That's what they're going to ask you in the exam, and what I want to point out about that is, in real life, we don't actually really get the refresh anymore. These features are on Windows 10 But a while back, not so long ago, one of those big updates that came on Windows 10 actually removed the refresh function. So the functionality is still there, but it's not called refresh anymore. So let's start at the beginning. What does refresh do? Or should I say, what did it do back then? So that will basically be like a format. It's kind of like a format, not quite. It's going to remove all the programs you had installed on your PC, but you don't need a disk for this. So it's going to basically send your PC back in time. It's kind of like a format, not quite. All the programs get removed, and you get to choose, do you want to keep the data on that machine or not? Do you want to keep the settings or not? So it does keep certain aspects. So it's kind of like a factory reset, but it's not, because it does at least keep your data. Where reset really kind of was like a format in wipe and load or whatever situation. All the programs get removed, all the data gets removed, all the settings gets removed. It's kind of like doing a clean installation of Windows, except you didn't. You didn't need a DVD, just puts it back the way it was when you just installed Windows. It keeps nothing. Where refresh at least kept some aspects. Nowadays, you'll find there's no refresh option, there's just the reset option. Now you might wonder, but what if I would like to keep something? Well, when you go and click on the reset button now, it actually asks you, is there something you would like to keep? And if so, what would you like to keep? Would you like to keep nothing? Would you like to keep the programs? Maybe their settings? Would you like to keep your data? What would you like to keep? So in most cases, I've seen it wipes the programs. The only ones that you get to keep is the ones that comes built into Windows. Something else I want to point out to you guys, just bear in mind, the tools we see in front of us is not the only ways to go and recover your Windows. That's simply what's in the course. You can alternatively go and use some other tools which are actually also built into Windows. Alright guys, let's have a look at disk maintenance. Now one of the first things we're going to be discussing in disk maintenance is fragmentation. It is not the only thing, however. We're also going to be looking at check disk, for those of you that know what that is. Now, fragmentation is basically just your hard drive that's getting messy. You can imagine it as having a desk at the office and getting to your desk in the morning when it's very organized, nice and clean, And when someone comes to you early in the morning and they want a certain document from you, you're probably going to find it very quickly and very easily because your desk is still, well, for the most part, very well structured, is the word I'm looking for here. And maybe around lunchtime, maybe it's time to go home, quitting time, as some people would go and call it. If someone comes to your desk, maybe in the late afternoon, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and they ask you for that same piece of document, are you going to find it? Yes, you will. It's still there. It's not like it's missing. But for you to find it, it's going to probably take you longer now. Because through the course of the day, your desk has gotten messy. Papers all over the place, all kinds of items all over the place. So when a person asks you for that document, you're probably going to tell them, okay, hold on, let me look for it. And you're going to look and look and look and lift papers and all kinds of stuff. Eventually, you'll find that document. So it's never gone. It's just messy, which is what fragmentation is. Fragmentation is the same as when your disk gets messy, your hard drive gets messy. So way in the beginning, when you just installed Windows or when you just got that computer, it's like your disk in the morning. It's nice and clean and very well structured. And as time goes by, you're obviously going to find yourself installing programs, uninstalling programs and games. You're going to go and add files and documents to that machine. You're going to remove files and documents. You're going to move stuff around in that machine, which means it gets fragmented, just like that disk of yours. So when you go and do defragmentation, which is the actual word I'm looking for here, that means you're going to go clean that disk of yours. You're going to take a few minutes to go and organize that disk of yours, to go and structure it so that when someone comes and asks you for something, you at least know where it is, and you can find it a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently. So when you go and defragment your hard drive, which is sometimes referred to as optimizing your hard drive, you're simply reorganizing it. So generally in the past, to be able to do that, you needed to have an X amount of free space, let's say 20% or so, because it's temporarily going to go and take some of those files in your hard drive, move them into that temporary space so that it can go and reorganize itself. And back in the day, we didn't really do that often. Most of us would completely skip on this, which was actually the wrong thing to go and do. We would only do this once in 6 months, once in 12 months, or eventually when a PC gets so darn gosh slow to the point where we get so annoyed where we're actually forced to go and do it. Nowadays, this is covered in the course. It may or may not be asked in the exam, but it's not actually something we do anymore Because what is the operating systems most of us are using these days? We're using Windows 10, and probably in the near foreseeable future, it's going to be Windows 11 by the time you guys watch this. On Windows 10, defragmentation actually happens automatically now. And this happens, I think, once a week by default. So the fact that it happens so regularly and it happens automatically means, first of all, it's going to happen very quickly because there's not much that would have changed on the hard drive. If you do this only once in 6 months, it's probably going to take you half an hour, maybe a few hours to go and get it done. But the fact that it does this automatically once a week, 10 to 1, this is going to be when you go to the restroom, when you go make yourself a cup of coffee or something like that. When you go and make that cup of coffee, your machine is going to take that idle time to go and do a little house cleaning, if you will. It's going to go and organize your hard drive. And the fact that it does this once a week means your PC is going to remain fast and optimal at all times. So that is, in a nutshell, what defragmentation is, guys. So on to our next one, being check disk. Now you can see there on the right hand side, they actually have a picture of what this check disk looks like. The way in the place you would find this is if you go into your computer, which I believe on Windows 10 it's called this PC. If you go to where your hard drives are displayed, if you right click on a hard drive and you go to properties, there's generally a tab that says tools. And if you go in there, you're going to find these two suckers. You're going to find check disk there, and you're going to find the defragmentation, which might be listed as optimizing the hard drives. So on the right hand side, that's what it looks like when you go run the defragmentation tool. And you'll see there at the bottom left of that right hand picture, it says scheduled optimization, and it says it's on. And you can see that the frequency is weekly. So by default it's on, and by default it's on weekly. I can't imagine in what possible situation you would want to go and turn that off. So unless you've got a very good reason, I do not encourage you to go and turn that off. Leave it on because it's going to leave your PC in an optimal state. The tool we have there on the left hand side, referred to as check disk, this is going to go and repair your PC or prevent it from having damaged clusters or sectors on your computer's hard drive. At least that's what it's supposed to do in a nutshell. If you go to that place I just described, if you go right click on a hard drive, you go to properties and then the tools menu, check disk is going to be there, and you could go run it via the GUI, which is what that picture is, GUI being the graphical user interface version. But the fact of the matter is, most IT people, any self-respecting technician, will not go and use the GUI. We normally do this in command prompt. Good old-fashioned CMD. So you're going to go into command prompt, you're going to go and type in check disk, you're going to specify for which drive you want to do this. You normally need to go and specify the drive letter, and that is normally it. I myself like to normally go and add a few parameters. Parameters means, it's going to go and do certain things. I'm going to go and set, for example, / or /x, which dismounts the hard drive. That's especially useful for external hard drives. And there might be a / r / f. One says repair, the other one says fix. It sounds like the same thing, but it doesn't do the same thing. If you actually go and check on Microsoft websites, they don't do the same thing. This is a very great tool to go and use on a hard drive that has been corrupted, especially an external hard drive. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, where you would lend your hard drive to a friend or a family member. They borrow it, they want to copy movies from you perhaps, or give you something. And as soon as you get that hard drive back and you plug it into your machine, it says you need to format that hard drive before you can go and use it. Now, obviously, you don't want to format the hard drive because that means you're going to lose whatever's on the hard drive. You don't want to do that. But yet your stuff is on there and you can't access it unless you format the hard drive. It is usually in most cases because that hard drive has gotten corrupt, and it could be for a lot of reasons, but the most common one is because those people that borrowed your hard drive did not release it safely. This is especially common with mechanical hard drives that's got moving parts. So if they just go and yank that hard drive out while it was still open on the computer, that is bad. So you're supposed to go to your system clock on that computer. You'll find it's normally going to display that hard drive, and there's an option there that says safely remove hard drive. It might display the hard drive's name. So you're supposed to go there, you click on safely remove the hard drive, and that's going to potentially avoid having issues like this. But anyway, besides all of that, from time to time, your normal internal hard drives also encounter problems for various reasons. It's got nothing to do with the age of the hard drive. It's got nothing to do with the size or the brand of the hard drive. It's not specific to anything. It's completely random. So maybe one day you're watching a movie, playing a game, you maybe have a document open, everything is 100% fine. The next day when you try and open that exact same item, whatever it might be, it suddenly doesn't want to open. It says it's corrupt or it gives you an error. So that could possibly be because of a corrupt sector or a corrupt cluster on your hard drive. So there's probably thousands or tens of thousands of sectors and clusters on hard drive. And each of your files, let's say it is a game, it is probably installed over 1,000 sectors and clusters. I'm making up a random number. I'm sucking it out of my thumb here. And if just one of those gets corrupted or banned or damaged in some sort of way, that game is not going to launch. It's not going to work. So what you can go and do is you can run this check this tool either via GUI or command prompt. It's going to first attempt to go and repair the damaged clusters and sectors. And if that is unsuccessful, it's going to then attempt to move your damaged data, which are on those damaged clusters and sectors. It's going to attempt to recover them and move them to a working cluster and sector. It's obviously going to sacrifice a tiny, tiny small portion of your hard drive space, so little so that you're not even going to notice it. It's less than a percentage in most cases. It's 0.00 something percent. You're not going to notice it. So it's going to try and attempt to move them to working clusters and sectors. If that is unsuccessful, then normally you've lost your data. Very, very rare though. In most cases, you should be able to recover your data. Alright, boys and girls, and then we have Windows Update. Oh boy, do I have a lot to say about Windows Update. Now, if you're using Windows 10, which I assume most of you probably are at this point in time, you probably would have noticed by now, if you're using that PC in your personal capacity, you probably don't have the ability to go and turn off Windows Updates anymore, which can be a real pain in the neck for some of us, especially if you're using an internet connection which is not uncapped, which means you have a limit on how much data you can use on the internet. Maybe you've got a 1 gig limit, 5 gig limit, 10 gig limit, and once it's up for the month. You're going to probably have to go and buy some extra from your provider, your service provider in most cases. So if you've got Windows 10 and it decides to go and do updates whenever it pleases, because it tends to do that, it's very likely going to go and use up all your data, which you wanted to use for gaming, watching movies, and doing whatever it is you do on the internet. Real pickle. So up to Windows 8.1, we had the ability to go into your control panel to Windows Update, and you could go and say, I do not want updates, or you do want them, and if so, when to install them, when to go and download them. You had full control over your updates, whether you wanted them, whether you did not want them, how you wanted them. Full control is what I'm saying here. Now, with Windows 10, you would think you would have more control of it being a newer operating system, but the fact of the matter is, you don't. So what you can go and do is there's quite a few things, and one of them that I used to go and do, which does not work anymore, I used to go into my services on my computer, and I would go and look for the Windows Update service, and I would simply just go and turn that sucker off, which is like turning it off in control panel like in the old days. And when I'm good and ready to go and update my PC, I would simply just go and turn on the Windows Update service. It would not necessarily update immediately, so I might have to go and force it to go and update then. And then at least then, if something goes wrong on my PC, I would know it was the update. But if my PC is just going to go and randomly update whenever it pleases, I mean, I'm not saying updates are bad. We should obviously get those updates. But if it's going to go and update when I'm not aware, never mind it using my data, if something goes wrong, maybe something is not compatible, maybe my mouse doesn't want to work anymore, it could be anything for that matter, I'm not necessarily going to go and suspect an update because I wasn't even aware that my PC didn't update. So you might find you as a technician, you're going to sit there on that PC, whether it be yours or someone else's PC, you're going to sit there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, troubleshooting what is the problem here. Meanwhile, it was simply an update of Windows that took place, which is causing this issue. So if you are going to go and update the PC manually yourself right now, and immediately after that update, something doesn't work anymore, obviously the culprit is going to be one of those updates you just did. It's just a matter of identifying which one, but it's going to make your life a lot quicker and a lot easier to go and do it that way. So disabling the Windows Update service, that doesn't work anymore. It still updates itself. So the only time you've got full control is if that machine is in a company domain environment. And in the company environment, they normally have some other softwares like WSUS, Windows Update Services, or SCCM, or Intune, or something in that regard that will go and update your machines when they see fit. They get to choose when they update the machines in their organization, how, where, which updates you get. But in your personal capacity, which is what this course is about, you don't really have choice, anymore. So I don't even know why this is in the course. They don't really ask about this in the exam anymore. I think it's a matter of because we don't have a choice in the matter, is it? So something you could go and do, which is not part of the course, it's not an exam, it's purely suggestive from my side to help those of you that do need to turn updates off on your Windows 10 machine, is you can go and specify that connection as a metered connection. It used to only work on Wi-Fi connections, in other words, just laptops and stuff, but it does work on Ethernet connections, in other words, your LAN cable, as well now. So once you've got that LAN cable plugged in, or once you're connected to that Wi-Fi connection, whichever one is the one that's got a data limit on it, You just need to go into your network settings on your control panel, and you'll find there's an option that pops up at that point in time that says make this connection a metered connection. So it's only going to make that connection a metered connection, so that specific Wi-Fi frequency or that specific network cable. If you go to a different network and plug a different network cable in, or if you go to a different hotspot, connect to a different Wi-Fi frequency, it's not going to apply anymore. Now, what a metered connection means and what it does is it assumes that connection has got a data limit on it, even though it might not, but it assumes. So whenever it's going to go and try and do a Windows update, it's not. You are going to see a few other things that's not going to work, like your email. So if you're going to go into your Outlook, there's going to be a yellow banner at the top that says you are on a metered connection. And it's not going to completely stop you. You can actually go click on a little gray button in that little yellow notification that says connect. If you click on connect, it's going to send all your mails and receive your mails. But until you go and click on connect, no mails are going to be received or sent, to save you data. But just because you click on connect doesn't mean everything on a computer is going to suddenly connect like your updates. It's only going to apply to your email in that scenario. Everything else on your machine is going to work just like fine. You can still go and download games and movies and whatever it is you want to go and do on the internet. You can still browse like normal. It is simply going to be things like your Windows updates, your emails, which can't go and do whatever they please whenever they please. So my suggestion to you guys is go and use a metered connection if you're sitting in a situation of you having a data limit of some kind. Alright, next up guys is anti-malware updates. Now I think it speaks for itself when I say it is very important for malware or anti-malware to be very up to date. Now anti-malware is not something specific. It is a category of things. So malware includes things like viruses, trojans, which is not the same thing, spyware, adware, ransomware, just to name a few. Anti-malware obviously is an anti-software, against all of those things we've just mentioned. So it is very important to keep your software, which is supposed to protect you against all of those things I just mentioned, up to date. If it's not up to date, there's a very, very good likelihood that something we just mentioned could actually slip through the cracks. So the way we keep them up to date is they normally go and update themselves in most cases. In the picture I've got here for you guys, we've got Windows Defender, which is actually built into your Windows 10. And if you've got Windows 10, you actually have an antivirus already in there, for free. A lot of people don't know that Windows Defender, which is built into Windows 10, is actually a free antivirus which is built in there. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen when the general public realizes that, hey, I actually already have an antivirus. Will they still go out to the local store and go and buy one off the shelf if they already have one? So I'm sure some people might still because of preference. It's kind of like I prefer to drive one brand of car where the next guy prefers to drive a different brand of car. It's preference. But then you get those folks out there that don't care what car they drive. As long as it gets from point A to point B, they're good to go. The same applies to antivirus or anti-malware in this case. As long as they've got an anti-malware which is up to date, a lot of folks are not going to care what they use as long as it's pretty decent. And the Windows Defender is ranked as one of the top and the best ones out there. I'm not promoting it, I'm just saying it's not too bad. It's probably not the best out there, but it's not too shabby. So please keep your antivirus and whatever else you're using up to date. We normally go and update the definition files, which is basically just a very, very large database, repository, or archive of all the possible viruses that's out there, at least the ones that they know about. It's signatures that it contains. And whenever it scans your emails, your files, or whatever it's scanning, it's going to go and compare the files in there, their signatures, to the ones that's in its database. If it finds a match, then that's obviously bad. That means there's something harmful in there. Alrighty, and then we've got driver updates. Now we did somewhat touch on this topic already earlier in one of these modules. So drivers, as you guys already know, is basically like a translator between your hardware and your operating system. Your operating system can't by default directly communicate with the hardware in your computer. It needs someone or something in the middle being the drivers. Now usually from Windows Vista or Vista, depending on how you want to say it, all the way to where we are now, Windows 10, Windows 11, all of those operating systems tends to install most drivers for you automatically. I would say between 95 to 99% of your drivers are going to be installed automatically because within your Windows operating system, it's got a driver repository which basically contains the drivers for pretty much most devices out there. There are going to be cases though when it might not install something's driver because that item is simply too new or just simply too weird or out of the ordinary for that matter. And if and when that happens, you might need to go and find a driver manually yourself. And there's also going to be situations where you might have a driver installed, but it might just be very outdated and you need to go and update it. A very good example of that would be your graphics card. So for those of you that's gamers like me, I'm also a gamer, you probably need to go and update your gaming card, your graphics card, your display card, all the same thing. You need to update its driver to the latest version. Otherwise the games might not work the way they were intended for the most part. So how and where do we go and do that? You could go and do it via the Windows Update. In other words, you just leave your PC, just make sure Windows Update is turned on, and it should go and update it automatically. So they say, but I've seen in a lot of cases it does not actually do that. So you as the IT person here might need to go and help it along. So the place where we go and do that is in the device manager. Now here's a picture for you guys of the device manager. There's probably like 10 or 20 different ways you can get to it. One of the easiest ways will probably be to go and right click on your start button on Windows 10, and there you'll find device manager. You can also go and find it under administrative tools. You can go run a search for it in Cortana. That's basically the little search block at the bottom left of your computer. There is really about 10 or 20 different ways you can access it. Now device manager, as you guys probably know by now, shows you all the devices in your computer. Now what we see in that picture is just the categories. You'll notice there's little arrows next to each device, which allows us to drop it down. So if I were to go to that one there that says display adapters, there's a picture for you guys. You can see it actually drops down. It's got my internal graphics card and it's got my, in this case, it's a GeForce 940. So what you're going to want to go and do there is you're going to want to go and click where it says update driver software. And what you're going to see is that little window there that asks you, do you want to browse your computer? That is probably what you're going to be doing realistically. That's not what this whole concept is about. But realistically in real life, you're probably going to go and download the drivers manually yourself from the manufacturer's website. And you're going to manually go and browse within your PC. It's probably going to be in your downloads folder. You're going to choose it there and there you go. Or you can go click on the top option. It says search automatically for updated driver software. It's supposed to, in theory, go and connect to the source, which might be Microsoft, and find that driver, well, the latest version at least, and update it accordingly. Now, the fact of the matter is 99% of the time that's not going to work. It's not a matter of they don't have the driver. It seems like it doesn't want to connect to the source where it's supposed to. So you're going to probably have to go and do it manually yourself. It doesn't matter what Windows version you're using. This is a bug and a glitch in all versions of Windows, even Windows 10. I can only assume and hope they would have fixed this on Windows 11. So you're going to probably go to browse my computer for driver software. And you're going to browse to where you download it or where your downloads get saved by default, which is probably going to be your downloads folder. So device manager is something we're going to probably go into way more depth later on. Not so much right now. Now we're just kind of touching on driver updates in general. We're not really covering device manager. We're just covering driver updates. But later on, we are going to go into device manager. We're going to cover how to go and update drivers, how to go and remove updates, what's the best way, the quickest way, how to recover devices, all of that. And it will be covered in the exam. All right, so let's take a look at scheduled backups. Now, the first thing you need to know regarding scheduled backups are it is essential to backup data, especially in a company environment. On your personal computer, maybe not as much, but it's still relatively important to go and back up data on your personal computer, because what if it's work related or something very important, and what if that machine breaks? What if it gets corrupt? What if it gets stolen or lost? Yeah, you're probably going to cry. So to avoid that, you might want to back up your personal PC as well. But getting back to the more important stuff here, in a company environment, an enterprise for that matter, it is absolutely crucial to go and back up, and back up some more. You can never have too many backups. Now, with regards to backups, there's different types of backups you get, many kinds. I'm just going to mention a few kinds for you guys here. So first of all, you get daily backups. I think it speaks for itself. That's a backup you're going to go and do every day. Within each of these types of backups I'm about to mention, you get other kinds of backups. You get full backups, incremental backups, differential backups. There is so many kinds to mention, but we're just going to lightly cover the surface of some of these now. So it is important in a company to make daily backups of everything, or at least everything that has changed on that specific day. So generally what we'll go and do in most companies is we'll do one big full backup of everything in a company. And then from there on forward, every day, every week, every month, we'll do what we call incremental backups. An incremental backup is basically just going to go and check what has changed since the last backup. So if nothing has changed, nothing gets backed up, which makes it very smooth and very quick. If you're going to go do a full backup every day, it's going to put too much strain on your servers and your network and all of that. Everything is basically just going to become laggy and rendered useless. It's not something you want to go and do. So generally we just do one full backup, preferably after hours, because of how much strain it's going to put on your network. It's going to make everything so damn slow. One full backup, and then from there on, every day you do daily incremental backups, weekly incremental backups, monthly incremental backups. So you've got daily, weekly, and monthly backups is what you're going to go and have. So if something happened in the last day or two, you can just go use your daily backups to recover whatever data was lost. If something happened, a week or two ago, you can use your weekly backups. And then, of course, you've got your monthly backups. How long you keep these backups are up to you, but I wouldn't recommend keeping them for a shorter period than 6 months. Keep them for at the very least for 6 months. The longer, the better. I would say keep them for 12 months or 24 months, just to be on the safe side. But do not keep backups for less than 6 months. Now, what you can also go and do is you get off-site backups. An offsite backup, like the name suggests, is a backup that's not physically on site. Now, realistically, what I myself did at a lot of my clients, I'm not sure if you guys do this or other people in the industry do this, but a lot of my clients, we did two kinds of offsite backups. The one offsite backup really is an offsite backup. I'll go make a backup. It could be onto anything. It could be like a hard drive. I'll make a backup of whatever it needs to be. Let's say it's a hard drive. And I'm going to go write a date and a timestamp on that hard drive. And I'm actually going to send it offsite to an undisclosed location, which even I don't know. Only the client knows what that is. It could be on the other side of the country. It could be wherever. And then the other kind of offsite backup you get is a kind that's not always discussed by everybody. Is I'm going to still go make a backup, just like the exact previous one I just did, except this time I'm not actually going to send it offsite. It's just not going to be plugged into anything. So it's not connected to anything. I'm going to go write a date and timestamp on it. It might be exactly the same as the previous one. Could even be a clone if you want to go call it that. And I'm going to go and lock that up in a safe somewhere, or at the very least a metal file cabinet. So I've got two offsite backups. The one is actually on site. It's just not plugged in. The other one is legit offsite. Now you might be wondering, why would you want to go and store one on site? The idea here is you need to have downtime as minimal as possible. Time quite literally is money in most cases. The quicker you can get your client or your company up and running, the better. So if it's just a normal digital problem, a virus, malware, anything like that, you can go use your offsite backup, which is on site, the one that's actually in that cabinet on that safe. If it's something very terrible that happened, let's say it was a riot, theft, it was a robbery of some kind, the building burned down, it was an earthquake, something very terrible, then you might have to resort to the actual offsite backup, which is going to take a lot longer to get there. But if it's not something as extreme as that, and it's just a digital problem, then you can go and use the offsite backup, which is physically on site. Now you might wonder, okay, but why would I want to use that when I've got daily, weekly, and monthly backups? You do get certain things out there that will actually corrupt your backups, like ransomware. Ransomware, which encrypts your data for your PC and your company, they know you do daily backups, weekly backups, and monthly backup. I've had clients where that ransomware would be under the radar. It wouldn't get picked up by any anti-malware because it's brand spanking new on the market. And they know you do these backups, so it'll lie dormant there on the systems. Basically hibernating, if you want to call it that. And it'll wait there for about a month or two. And then one day, boom, encrypts everything. Daily, weekly, monthly backups. Anything that was plugged in is gone. So unless you've got offsite backups, you are going to be in a pickle. So it is absolutely crucial to make backups. And I cannot emphasize on how important it is to actually go and do offsite backups. That is a thing that's something a lot of people tend to skip on because they think, oh, I've got daily, weekly, monthly backups, and they go back 6 months or 12 months. Yeah, but for all you know, they could have gotten encrypted because they're sometimes plugged in. So make sure your backups are not all plugged in, because you never know. They might get corrupt, they might get a virus on them, they might get ransomware even on them. So just something to watch out for. So just to recap, you get full backups. That's something you're only going to do once. That's probably going to be in the beginning, in the initial stages. And then from there on forward, you're going to probably do what we call incremental backups. In other words, just checking what has changed. If someone uploaded one document, only that one document is going to get backed up, because everything else has already been backed up. If they deleted one document, that document is obviously going to be deleted from the backup now, because that's seen as a change. If they change the document, same story. Alright guys, here we've got something called Task Scheduler. I see they call it Task Schedulers, but it's actually called Task Scheduler. Now this nifty little tool is actually available both on the server side as well as the client side. At first glance, I'm not going to lie, it looks very overwhelming, but it's actually a very easy, very simple tool to go and use. Now, like the name suggests, it's used to schedule things on your PC. You can go and schedule a certain program, for example, to start up. It could be a game, it could be a built-in program, it could be a game or a program you've installed afterwards. It could perhaps be a script, like a command prompt script, a PowerShell script, you name it. So you name it, you can go and do it. Now, I personally think it looks almost like this tool was designed to create viruses. That's obviously not what it was created for, but it looks like that. Now, towards the top right hand side is actually a button there. I don't see it right now that says create a task. Oh, it is there, second from the top. When you click on that, it's going to ask you, for example, what is this task going to be called? You can go and give it a name. So you give it a nice little name. It's going to ask you for a trigger. There's a very long list of triggers you can go and choose from. For example, you can go and choose, is this event going to be triggered at startup? As soon as this PC starts up, or as soon as the person logs on, as soon as they change something, or it's going to be hooked up to a date and a time. So trigger wise, that sounds like a virus because viruses normally have a trigger. Under actions, you choose what needs to happen. So usually in that case, I would go and choose for it to start a program. And you can go and choose then, for example, it needs to start a program that's built in, something you installed, or for example, a script. Most people, including myself, would normally go and connect it to a script, a PowerShell script or a batch script. Batch script is a script that ends with a .bat at the end. In other words, it's a command prompt script is what we did. This could be for something, pretty much anything. Now, if you want to go and automate stuff, this is not really something you want to go and do on your client PC. I do use it on Windows 10 and other client operating systems from time to time, but it's very rare. Normally, I personally use this a lot on the server side because servers are for the most part unmanned. That's the idea. They're supposed to run on their own, and they're supposed to be automated for the most part. So imagine there's something you want to run on a server every day, every week, or every month, and you don't want to be there. You're going to have to go and start this service, whatever it is, manually yourself. It's a drag. So why not automate it? And one of the tools you can go and use is Task Scheduler. So an example of what I can give you guys of where I use this, I had a client who I'm not going to mention right now for obviously for confidentiality reasons. I had a client that wanted me to go and do backups. Most of my clients wants me to go and do backups for them. So one of the first things I do when I get to my clients is I make sure their antivirus is updated. I make sure backups are working. The usual checklist, that IT people would go and do. And this one client wanted me to do backups for them, but on very specific servers, they said, we do not want you to install any software, including backupping software. So I was like, okay, so you want me to do backups, but I'm not allowed to install software. Now, granted, Windows has a few built-in Windows backupping tools, but I don't know. I don't really like them. They kind of suck and they're unreliable, and sometimes they corrupt your backups, quite frankly. So I thought, okay, so how am I going to get this done? I suppose I could go and manually copy paste everything old school, but can you imagine how long that's going to take? And secondly, I've got other clients, I've got other things to go and do. And this client where I'm talking about, they wanted me to go and do daily backups, weekly backups, monthly backups. It's just not feasible time-wise for me to go and do that. It's just nuts. So what I did was I went into Notepad. This is how you can go write a batch file script, by the way. You can go to Notepad. It's basically a glorified copy and paste command is what I did. It's a 1 or 2 line command line script. I wrote it there. It's basically going to go and copy paste it automatically instead of me doing it manually. It's going to go and copy paste it from the server to a remote destination, which I believe in this case was a NAS drive, a network attached storage device. So it's going to go and back up from the server to a network attached storage device. So the command prompt command is going to go and copy paste it for me on my behalf. Now, realistically, in real life, if you go and copy paste, especially that large quantities of data, there's bound to be issues. It might tell you the file is too large for the destination. It might say the name of the file is too long. It might say there's no folder, there's nothing. So I basically went and added a bunch of parameters. If you remember parameters when we talked about hard drives, check disk and all that, it's going to go and allow it to go and do a few things. So I added the parameter that if it gives an error that says the file name is too long, it would automatically go make it shorter. If it gives an error that says there's no folder, well, freaking make one then. If it gives this error, it'll go and do this. If it'll give that error, it'll go and do that. So there's basically an answer for every action. So it's going to go and automate the whole thing. And eventually, when I get back there, after a day or two, I would see the backups have automatically completed via command prompt. So I just hooked it up to Task Scheduler. So I simply took that script and I hooked it up to a daily schedule. Every day at, let's say, 5 o'clock, it'll go and kick in. The weekly one will kick in every day, not every day, maybe only every Friday at 6 o'clock, because from 5 o'clock until 6 o'clock, the daily one might still be happening on a Friday. The monthly one will also be on a Friday, but maybe not from 6 o'clock. It'll be from 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, because then the weekly one might still be busy on that particular Friday. And that's basically how I went and did it. So, in the day, Task Scheduler looks really complicated, but in reality, it's a very easy, very simple tool to go and use. Do not judge a book by its cover. The first time I saw that picture that you guys are looking at right now, I thought, oh dear God, this is going to be very complicated. And the fact of the matter is, as soon as you go in there, you're going to see it's actually really as easy as cake. Alright guys, and like usual, you know what to do at this point. Please give the video a like. I do put a lot of effort into it. I mean, for crying out loud, look at how long this video is. It nearly killed me to make this video. So a like would be payment for me. And if you can give me a video a like, that's basically like payment for me. You can pay me in likes. If you're new to my channel, and if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. At least then you'll know when Module 7 gets released. So preferably with notification bell, otherwise you might not see it when it comes out. So notification bell should inform you when Module 7 gets uploaded. And quite frankly, pretty much just any free training I upload, I suppose. If you guys want, additional support, you're welcome to join me on Discord. There's a Discord link in the description of the video. It is not my server. I think it's called Free IT Study Group or something in that regard. It's just a group that I happen to be in. I'm listed there also as Burning Ice Tech. So it's full of people, that's like you and me, that's in IT, that's either studying or teaching. So you can either get support from myself or other people in the industry on that group. And if you guys need any additional support on any of the topics covered in this specific module, you're more than welcome to drop a comment down below. Let me know what you're struggling with, or if you've got a question about the exams, drop the comment down below and I'll gladly get back to you and see how I can assist you. Otherwise, we can just, talk on Discord and you can just ask me a question there. Alright guys, if you've given a like, if you've given a subscribe, I will see you guys on the next video, being Module 7 of the CompTIA A+ course.
If you love me, let me know. If you don't, then let me.